Today I'd like to continue our discussion of the Gospel of Matthew and take a look today at chapter 2 of that Gospel. We sometimes use the expression with regard to Matthew, the first Gospel, but we know historically the first Gospel composed was probably the Gospel of Mark, and Matthew probably second, then Luke and John. In chapter 2, we are greeted with the days of King Herod. This is after the genealogy of Jesus has been established, and King Herod reigned from 37 to 4 BC, and we get into that perplexing little issue with regard to the birth of Jesus, that it was actually BC, before Christ, or now BCE, before the Common Era. But again, the historical dating wasn't precise in those days. And of course, the calendar was changed subsequent to the composition of the Gospels. We see here that there are Magi that are coming. Magi were probably from the Persian priestly caste. They were really men with more than human knowledge. These particular Magi are astrologers. They're familiar with the stars. So they had this special type of knowledge. They were respected in their countries. And there were people who obviously here are on a mission. They see something special and they want to be part of this. They are looking for the newborn king of the Jews. So something about this particular star tells them, let's travel after this. It's going to indicate something special, and we want to come and be part of this. The star. What about the star? An ancient belief was that a star appeared at the time of a ruler's birth. So obviously Matthew is trying to set this up that Jesus is going to be a ruler. He's going to be a king. In the Hebrew scriptures, we have the story of Balaam, Numbers chapter 24, verse 17. The star shall advance from Jacob. So perhaps this is the reference that Matthew is trying to bring us to. This star is going to be connected with Jacob and Abraham and Isaac and the whole history of the Jewish people. Sometimes the star is referred to as Halley's Comet. Halley's Comet was from 12 to 11 BC, so most people who study this issue think it probably wasn't Halley's Comet, but of course that's speculation that we don't know precisely. The convergence of Jupiter and Saturn, though, happened in 7 to 6 BC and would have been an amazing event. Many who study the stars and the planets think that this is probably the reference, but again, we don't know for certain. The star that rises from Jacob. So this is the reference, that an allusion to David, and it's interpreted in a messianic sense, this expression, the star that rises from Jacob. So this particular star is going to be a star of great significance, and a person of great significance will come. And that is the reference that Matthew is trying to establish here. Many people will say, well, is this a real incident? Did this really happen? And again, we don't know for certain. We do know that this story has a very rich meaning in terms of the appearance of the Messiah to the Gentiles, and really a beautiful, well-crafted story. So perhaps there is some basis there. Herod was upset when he heard that news, that there was going to be a king, a rival. He didn't want any rivals. He didn't want any kings. So where was this Messiah to be born? Jewish legend, the sacred scribes warned Pharaoh about the imminent birth of a child who would lead Israel out of Egypt. Pharaoh made plans to destroy the child. So this ancient story, this Jewish legend, is perhaps being referenced here, that the Messiah was going to be born, and this Messiah was going to have special history and a special memory for the Jewish people. And just as with Pharaoh wiping out the children, plans to destroy him, so Herod is going to follow in that path as well. And that story would have been a popular story among the Jewish people. So the answer given is that the child is going to be born in Bethlehem. So Micah chapter 5, verses 1, and 2 Samuel 5:2, shepherd my people Israel. So this biblical reference, is a combination of those two verses, verse in Micah and 2 Samuel, and it really establishes that Bethlehem, which is translated the house of bread, the living bread, the bread of life, will be born there. And the star stopped right at the house. Isn't that convenient? Beautiful symmetry there. That's where it stopped, so they know. And of course, we see this as a house, not a cave, as we have in Luke. The Magi are overjoyed. Response of the Magi parallels the response of the disciples. The disciples are overjoyed when they hear the news of the resurrection of Jesus. So we see this response of the Magi, we see the response of the disciples, again in parallel. So they enter the house, and they do homage, and they bring gold, frankincense, and myrrh, a combination of Psalm 72, verses 10 and 15, and Isaiah 60, verse 6. And it led to seeing the Magi as kings, the Isaiah verse. Of course, it's not mentioned that they are kings, but we sometimes hear the expression the three kings. They really are referred to in Matthew as Magi, but it's a reference to Isaiah with the kings bringing gifts. Is where we get this concept of the three kings. And three to match, because there are three gifts. But again, the number isn't mentioned in Matthew. So they have a dream to go a different way. The dream theme, very important. And really what's saying here is the acceptance of Jesus by the Gentiles. Here is this, people who are foreigners, and they are accepting Jesus. The angel of the Lord comes in a dream to Joseph to flee to Egypt. Out of Egypt I have called my son. Hosea chapter 11, verse 1. Egypt was a traditional place of refuge for those who were fleeing from danger in Palestine. They would frequently go to Egypt. We see this in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 40. We see it in Jeremiah chapter 26, verse 21. So we see here really what Matthew is trying to tell us about is a reliving of the Exodus experience. And this reliving of the Exodus experience is the idea of the new Moses. Just as Moses led the people to freedom, now Jesus is also going to lead the people to freedom.